All right, class, we're about to learn how to make corded piping. We've got some cotton cord here, and we have got our pre-cut bias strip that we made earlier. What you do when you're making this corded piping, and I say corded piping because piping refers to a few different things. This is technically corded piping, but you will hear it just referred to as piping by and large. But ultimately, what you do is you sew this muslin around this cord to give you a fabric covered cord. It'll look kind of like that when you're done. You've seen this on the edge of cushions, maybe in some clothes, or as a decorative element on bags. It's called piping, and we're gonna make it today. Now, to do it, you need to use your zipper foot. But the general principle is laying your cord in the middle of your fabric and sewing it down. And you're gonna sew it down along this edge right here. You don't want to catch the cording that's inside. You want to sew right up against it, and that's why we use our zipper foot. So, you can pin this. I find it more difficult to use pins though. So I'd say let's give it a try without. The goal is you want to keep your edge seam allowances even as you put it through the machine. And if you look at this part, see how we've got this point up here? But if you turn it over, we don't overlap until right there. So you can stick a pin in there to remind yourself where that happens if you want. But in essence, you won't need to start sewing until about right there where the two overlap. And you will backstitch if you'd like. And you can stick your pins in sideways. Here's the deal though. Your presser foot has to run over all this. So the more pins you use, the more difficult it's gonna be. Mostly it's just about control with the hands. And I'll show you as we sew. I'm gonna pull the machine over and get to work on this. I've already set up my zipper foot. I know where I wanna be. That's where I wanna start sewing. So I'm gonna drop that down. And make sure that on this under edge, that my edges are lining up. See how they're not quite lined up there? You control that as you sew. A little bit of rolling action with the hands basically to make that work. But get yourself set up as much as you can, get as much lined up on the edge and get this all snugged over here. Set your stitch length to a 3 and adjust your needle position as you need to take it close to that edge. You're gonna want it as close to that edge as possible. And if you'd like, you can drop your needle in to begin with. And I'm gonna sew this. You want me to zoom in a little? Would that help? Here we go. Actually, I'm gonna zoom out a bit so you can see as I manipulate my hands. I think that might help. If I can get that to cooperate. There we go. All right, and we're gonna sew. Backstitch just a bit at the end there. And as you can see, I'm just keeping the piping snugged up on the edge. I'm keeping an eye on this edge over here and making sure my edges are lined up nicely. And we just keep sewing. You don't want to push it against the presser foot because then you run the risk of catching your cording. Every few inches or so, stop and get everything adjusted. And use your hands to control it in place. Now, if you see this, you see how it's kind of wanting to like buckle and curve there? That's because I'm pushing it too hard against the plate, or the presser foot, so. It is okay for this part of the piping to be a little bit loose because as you attach it to something in the next steps, it will get tighter. But since we like to aim for perfection all the time, right? We want to make this as perfect as possible. So I just took some time to adjust. I'm using my left hand to hold my raw edges in the place that I want them to be. I'm using my right hand to manipulate things and control through the machine as we go. I'm getting close to the end here. And when you get to the end where the overlap stops, you can backstitch. See how we've got this here? That's where we're gonna stop. No sense in sewing when you're not sewing two things together. And that's our piece of piping sewn. You've made corded piping. I'll show you as soon as I pull this out from under the machine. Here we are. It should look like that. You should have your pipe and then your little flange of fabric. And that's your piece of corded piping.